Good morning. This is the Water Rights Fee Stakeholder Meeting. We'll go ahead and get started here in about 1 minute. Thank you. Good morning and welcome. This is the State Water Resources Control Board's Water Rights Fee Stakeholder Meeting. My name is David Ceccarelli. I'm the Fee Chief here at the Water Board. Today with me, I have Glenn Osterhage from the Fee Branch, and I also have John Russell, the Deputy Director of the Division of Administrative Services. Today is Tuesday, June 9th. This meeting is webcast, and also it's a teleconference meeting. For those that are calling in, the phone number is on the agenda. That teleconference number is 1-888-273-3658. And there's a participant code that you have to key in, which is 300828. Throughout the meeting, if you have any questions and you'd like to email those in, please click on the link on the agenda under the Fee Branch email. And at the end, currently we have the phone muted for those that are participating right now on the teleconference. However, at the end, we will unmute that phone line, and we will go ahead and have some dialogue and help answer questions. And again, we have received some questions in advance, and after our fourth item on the agenda before the open discussions, we'll go through and we'll start answering those questions. And as questions come in, we'll take a moment and we'll listen to those and we'll be able to respond to those. With that said, I'm going to pass it over to John Russell for some introduction remarks at this point.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for your patience in dealing with us in these virtual stakeholder meetings. We're going to try a little bit better in the future. We're maybe a Zoom meeting or something like that. We're not at that proficiency level, though, yet that we were comfortable doing that. I just wanted to set the stage or set the tone of the meeting here a little bit, that in general, our staff recommendation is not to increase any water rights fees for this year, same as with the water quality fees, for those of you who were on that meeting a few minutes ago. That's due to a number of reasons, but we'll go through that. There are a couple little wrinkles with the water rights fees, and those are on the agenda. One of them is the AB 658 fees. So we'll go through those, but in general, again, our recommendation to our board is not to increase any fees. That, I think we'll hand it over to Glenn to do the bulk of the presentation.
All right, thank you, John. We're going to go to agenda item number 2, which is the cost drivers. On this, I don't have the comparison on here to the meeting we had in March, but very little has changed for the water rights in the May revise versus January proposed budget. The only change, and it's a removal from the January, was a BCP. I'm trying to make sure I have the right number here. It was SB 19, the stream gauging plan. It was $200,000. It was in the January proposed. It was removed, and it's not part of the May revise. And again, it's $200,000. So the overall impact on this, if you look at this chart, the percent change, the very right-hand column is 8.9. This number, I should let everyone know, is just looking at what's in the May revise versus what was in our budget last year. So what's changing as far as the expenditure number. In March, when the steam gauging was in there, it was 9.6. So it did go down just a little bit. None of this information takes into consideration our fund reserve. Historically, or at least the last couple of years, we've been having a structural shortage. Our revenue has generally been a little bit lower than our expenditures. It was designed that way, kind of a tiered structure in our fees. We would increase fees, a portion that we could make sure we do on a yearly basis, and that was carrying over. So none of this takes into that consideration. The fund reserve, this wasn't mentioned in our meeting this morning for water quality. We're still waiting for the FISCAL components to be done for a year end for 18-19, and then start working on the monthly reports for the current fiscal year. So we do expect to have a little bit of a fund reserve. We don't know right now how much of a fund reserve we're going to have. But as John indicated, our proposal, or what we intend to go to our board in September, is to recommend no fee increases. And then as the environment, the economics hopefully start improving throughout the state, we'll monitor it throughout next year and see what the impacts are going into next year. So really the only change on this chart from what we did back in March is the removal of one $200,000 BCP, and that's about it. Most of it, as John said, we're going to wait to see what's in the adopted budget that should come out in the next week or so. Obviously, if there's any changes that are in there that were not in the May revise, we'll discuss those at our next meeting, which is August 6th, and go from there. So David, is there anything you wanted to add in? Because there wasn't a lot for me to go over as it relates to water rights.
I believe that's it at this time on the numbers.
Okay. So as David said, we'll wait and hold off on questions until we get down to the open discussion. So we're going to move down to agenda item number 3. There's a presentation by program staff. Amanda and Shelby, I believe, are on the line. This is related to AB 658 and the application for 5-year underground storage temporary permit filing fee. That's a mouthful to say there. So we're going to go ahead and unmute the phones for program staff to make their presentation on this topic.
Great. Thank you all for your time today. My name is Shelby Witherby, and I am an engineer in the division's permitting program. And part of my work involves processing groundwater recharge permitting filings and helping with program development. Today I am presenting the staff proposal for fiscal year 2020 through 2021 for the 5-year temporary permit application fee. So to provide some context for this proposal, Assembly Bill 658 was passed in 2019 by the legislature, which allows for parties to pursue a 5-year temporary permit for projects that will divert surface water and place it into underground storage. This is a great option for parties implementing SGMA, so GSAs and other applicable local public agencies looking to target high flows and address groundwater sustainability goals. The purpose of the 5-year permit is to provide another tool in the toolbox, which contains the 180-day temporary permit and the permanent authorization, which we sometimes call standard permit. The 5-year temporary permit can act as a bridge to divert water while a standard application is in process. The 5-year temporary permit can offer parties a better pathway than the 180-day temporary permits due to the collection of information to assist with protest resolution of their standard application and year-to-year consistency of permit terms. However, this water rate option hasn't been used yet. That might be because parties aren't ready to file yet, or it could be because there's a drawback. That is, under the current fee schedule, parties pay the standard application fee. That can be a fairly hefty fee, depending on how much water they're asking to divert. So, to address this issue, we are looking at this as similar to other groundwater recharge permitting options, where we may want to incentivize participation with reduced fees. As such, we investigated scaling the fee to be more than a single year of the temporary 180-day underground storage fee, but less than the standard permanent application fee. And so a description of the options are shown here in the stakeholder fee packet. This is located on page 1 of attachment 2. And so option 1 is a no change scenario. Applicants who want a 5-year permit would pay the same fee as if it were a standard permanent application. Option 2 is an intermediary option between our recommended option and the current fee. Most groundwater recharge projects are between 10,000 and 100,000 acre feet, so this option will typically be more expensive to groundwater recharge stakeholders than a recommended option. And this brings us to option 3, and option 3 matches the cost of 5 consecutive years of temporary underground storage fees, which includes the first year of initial filing with 4 years of renewal. This option is the same cost a party would pay for 5 years of 180-day temporary underground storage permits. And the way that it would be implemented is to use the same fee language that we already have in place for the 180-day temporary permit. And in practice, parties would pay the application fee and 4 years of baseline renewal upfront, and then pay the difference in renewal fee based on the actual amount diverted. And again, this may seem a bit confusing, but it's the same approach that we have for the 180-day permit, which people have already been using for several years. Staff's current recommendation is to change the current fee to option 3, so it's the same cost for parties as if they pursue 5 years of 180-day temporary permits for their project. We would appreciate feedback on this topic, so if you have any comments and questions, please do let us know within the next month, so by no later than July 9th. You can send your comments to the fee email, which is waterrightsfees@waterboards.ca.gov. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Shelby. If we want to go ahead and switch over to page 2, this just shows the breakdown of the various options as presented by the program staff. So as indicated, if you have any questions on this, reach out to us. We'll loop in the program staff and we can address those appropriately. Amanda, is there anything else you wanted to add?
No, Shelby covered it all.
Okay.
And Gary, are there any questions at this point? No questions online yet.
Okay, so feel free to email in questions. We're going to go to the next agenda topic. I know this is kind of a vague. People are wondering, what does it mean, other items on the horizon? But this is really a kind of a placeholder for David Rose, our attorney for the Water Rights Program, on a couple of items that he just wanted to discuss, and then we'll move on to open discussion. So David Rose, if you're on the line, go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So there were 2 main items I just wanted to tee up. They're not ripe just yet in terms of budget and knowing exactly what the plans or options or recommendations are from staff. But the first one is related to the, AB 658, and the governor's proposed budget had a recommendation in it. It's on the Department of Finance website that the Water Board would set fees for, set a fee schedule that would collect fees for Department of Fish and Wildlife work on those permits. So, right now that's at early stage trailer bill language or budget trailer bill language. So we don't know what it's going to end up looking like or how exactly we would be estimating that. But if that goes through and the Water Board is directed to set and collect fees for Department of Fish and Wildlife expenditures, in essence, on those 5-year groundwater recharge permits, then we will be coming up with a proposed structure to do that. So I wanted to put that out there and let people know that maybe by the next fee stakeholder meeting, we'll have a little better sense, but just putting out there that it is on the horizon and we'll have to be figuring out how to do that. The other item on the horizon is, I don't know how much anybody has been tracking the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission waiver conclusions, determinations, decisions, but that is going to pose a potential need for the board to restructure the fees for those FERC licensed water quality certification projects If the water board is concluded to have waived its certification authority on one or more projects, then two things will happen in essence. One is that the water boards will not be exercising continuing oversight over those projects for the duration of the license if there's no certification and the water board has no direct authority over the project from a water quality certification standpoint. And two, we wouldn't be charging fees to that project because we're not working on that project. So the current fee structure that we have for FERC licensed projects with water quality certifications divides the fees into two main categories, which is pre-license and post-license. And there's, if you're familiar with those projects, there's a certain fee structure set for per kilowatt hour, pre-license and post-license. So those fees may need to be restructured either with more categories or with a shift in the amount of fees that are paid at a certain time to recover essentially the costs that are not going to be recovered for under annual fees paid by projects whose certification has been determined to have been waived. So that's it. We don't have a proposal at this time because we don't know all the ins and outs of it, and also because the FERC fees are separately tracked, and we have a pretty good sense a year in and year out of how to charge those as closely as possible to the FERC water quality cert fee payers. It's going to really only involve that group, and because they're annual fees and not application fees. Every year that we come back here, if we are not spot on the first year, we'll do some iterative corrections the next year. But we will be working on a proposal as soon as we have some more details as to what this will look like, and hopefully also have that for the next fee stakeholder meeting. So those are the two things I just wanted to note were on the horizon. At this stage of the budget process, we don't have a specific proposal in line for either of those things, but we'll have one as soon as we can and roll it out through the stakeholders at the stakeholder meetings or separately so that we can get as much feedback as possible. That's it for me, unless and until there's questions. So I'll turn it back over to Dave.
Thank you, David. So as we move on to the next agenda topic, the process we're going to use here is we did get questions from Bob Gore prior to the meeting. David will address those. We'll then ask if any email questions that have been submitted during the meeting. We'll address those, and then we'll open up the microphone if anyone has any comments they want to make on there. So I'm going to turn it over to David to answer the questions that were submitted prior to the meeting.
So question number one, I will actually refer back to Glenn because it is on the cost driver sheet. It's a difference between state operations and the pro rata cost.
Thanks, David. We're doing a little volleyball back and forth here. So to me, pro rata, DOJ legal services are types of state operations. We broke those out just because the costs or the impacts are a little higher for those two specifically, instead of showing state operations as just being, hey, we're going up roughly 9%. The primary drivers for state operations as what's left over is more employee compensation, the retirement, and those costs. Where pro rata is our costs for other state agencies for the support work. And then the DOJ legal services is for work that office does for us. So we just broke those out as their individual lines because they were a little larger in their impact to the expenditure changes. So to really, they're all state operation costs. We just broke them out individually.
So the next question had to do with, of course, we have a cost driver, and it's a line item for the Department of Justice, and out of our budget, we're having to pay for their services, and of course, those services are basically they represent us in litigations, so we have to pay. We're paying for those costs, and that's spread out to the water rights fee payers. So I just wanted to that is a budget line item, and that we're paying through that through the water rights fund. And that's for, again, for the litigations for our water rights holders.
And I will add the DOJ Legal Services is more than just water rights. There is a portion that goes towards the WDPF or water quality programs. So it's not specific just to water rights. They take a proportional share of the costs for their fund.
So the next two questions are more program related, and I'll let program add anything if they like to. Number 3 was, are the petition fees being reviewed annually as agreed last year? And this is to prevent another sticker shock from 10 plus years of status quo presumptions. Yes, we are evaluating the effects of the new petition fees annually, and this is done after each fiscal year. Question number 4 had to do with the progress made by the 7 dedicated PYs on various backlog. This is from the 2016-17 BCP for water rights permitting and licensing augmentation. We do have some performance measures. There's several links. I have a response that I will forward to Bob Gore. Amanda or Sam, if you're on the phone, if there's anything else you want to add. Again, I don't want to get to a lot of details, but if you'd like to add anything, but I will share the response from program that, again, has a lot of links, and I will send that to Bob Gore.
Sure, that sounds good. This is Amanda Montgomery. I would say that for the people on the phone that might be interested in the same material, if they go to our Division of Water Rights website and they enter into our eRIMS database, on that front page, we have several different progress reports that have information on all the types of final work product deliverables that were in that BCP. So, and we also have a kind of new tool there that is reporting on the milestones of petitions and applications that are in the process of going, working their way through to final approval. All those major milestones are now reported on, and we indicate if kind of the ball is in our court as a division or if it's in the applicant or petitioner's court. So those are some new tools available to the public in our eRIMS database. And that's all I have.
Thank you. And I will forward off the responses from Bob Gore. And finally, and I think Glenn had mentioned this earlier, in the Jan 10th budget, there was a BCP for stream gauging and in-stream flows, which was $200,000. So Glenn kind of mentioned that the impact to that was very minimal. I think you had said it went down about 0.5%.
It was 0.7, so less than 1%.
But less than 1%. So if there's any other further questions, please don't hesitate to go ahead and send an email, and Glenn and I can kind of go back over and look at those numbers.
Okay, so that answers the submitted questions prior to the meeting. Gary, did we get any online questions?
Yeah, one question from Chuck White, who's asking for a reminder on the proposed temporary water rights permit to divert water for groundwater storage applies to diverted surface water for such storage. Then, when the stored water is removed from underground storage, there is no additional water right permit required, correct?
I don't know if Amanda, if you heard that.
Sure, I can take this. This is Amanda Montgomery. So when we issue a water right permit, whether it be 180-day, 5-year, or a standard permanent authorization, that permit is always for both the diversion of water, so taking it out of the stream, and the use of the water. So either the direct use or taking it out of storage and using it for whatever that might be, municipal, irrigation, there's lots of uses that are allowed. So I think that answers the question. So there isn't a separate fee. It's all in one. That's all I have.
Gary, any others come in? No other questions? So we answered the email questions. We'll open up the floor here to anyone who has any comments on the phone. Go ahead and speak. All nice and quiet. So we went through our agenda topics, went through the cost drivers program, made a presentation on the application for the 5-year underground storage temporary permit filing fee. There was a couple of items that may show up related to, excuse me, Department of Fish and Wildlife, related to AB 658, and issues that may come up related to the FERC waiver. Answer the questions that we had submitted. Next steps is
I don't know. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead. I
just
forgot
have-
to say that there is a delay sometimes, so we apologize if we're asking and don't hear right away. So go ahead, please.
Yeah, unfortunately, I came in on the call late, but I am interested in the underground storage of groundwater. And I'm wondering if it's appropriate or not to ask this question here, but did you guys decide if you're doing environmental review for those permits?
So this is Amanda Montgomery. So if you're referring specifically to the 5-year temporary permit, that is a new authorization in the water code, and you can look up the bill language if you're interested in it. We will be putting out more website content in the future, but it does require environmental compliance, which could be CEQA. So that's kind of the same for all types of water rights. There's a few particular situations that are a little different, but the 5-year does require compliance, environmental compliance.
Okay, great. And was it always that way in the code?
I didn't catch your question.
I'm sorry. Does the water code, when it was written in the water code, did it always require CEQA?
So CEQA came about in the for the 5-year temporary permit, yes, because that just came online on January 1st, 2020.
Okay.
If you're asking about water rights permitting in general, CEQA came about in the 1970s, and permitting started in 1914. So there was a period of time when CEQA was not required because it did not exist. But since we've had CEQA, it's been generally required for water rights permitting. That's all I have.
Yeah, no, I was specifically asking about the underground storage program, the new storage program. So yeah,
Sure.
you answered my question very well. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. And there is a particular twist for that for the 180-day temporary permit, and you can look that up on our website for the Division of Water Rights if you go to groundwater recharge, and you can read all about it. And there's context there for program stuff. So if you have further questions, you can contact us, and we're happy to continue the conversation.
And you're the right person to do that with?
Sure. Yeah. And we have the program contacts on the webpage, the particular staff. That's all I have.
Yeah, no, I was specifically asking about the underground storage program, the new storage program. Oh yeah,
Sure.
And there is very well. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. And there is a particular twist for that for the 180-day temporary. Sorry, it was cutting out a bit. I can just guess to what you said. We do have a website that describes the 180-day and the standard permitting for underground storage, and we'll be adding content on the 5-year temporary permit option very soon. So that's all I have.
And if we didn't answer any of your questions and you'd like to email us after this meeting, please do with that email address, the Fee Branch email, and we'll work with program and get responses for you.
Gary, do you have any other online emails?
No other questions.
Okay, anyone else online want to have any comments?
Yes, I do have a question.
Go for it.
Yes, on the temporary permit, and just I've got some concerns with the cost that's being proposed. Picking on your, say, a 10,000 acre foot project, you're showing that the fee, assuming they don't divert any water, is about $12,000 for the 5 years. Once they go to a full permit, that's probably somewhere in $150,000 range for that application. Are you guys able to do all the work necessary for that $12,000 fee, or is that being subsidized by other ratepayers?
Oh, so this is Amanda Montgomery. So the 5-year temporary permit is a brand new thing that started January 1st, 2020, and no one has applied for it yet. So we don't know exactly how much staff effort is going to be involved in processing those. We're committed to tracking the first few ones that we get in, what it looks like. But really, the fee proposal that we have for option 3 is based on our existing underground storage fees for the 180 days. And if you were able to participate in the stakeholder meeting for that process, which lasted a few years, the board actually set that fee very, very low originally. I think it was starting at $100, and then there was a surcharge based on how much you diverted, and then it raised up to what we currently have. Both of those fee constructs are, we did estimate staff time for the first few 180 days that we processed, and they were much higher than the current fee structure for those. So it is, I guess fee staff could talk about this, but it's, the fee structure there is paid for in part by other parties subsidizing that cost. It's just the nature of those water rights being a priority. So that was worked through with the stakeholders. But if other stakeholders have different opinions on that, they can always weigh in with that input.
Yeah, I have a real problem subsidizing an application that's potentially adversary to an existing water right. So that is something we will be submitting written comments on. But again, you know, anything that's coming into the fee program, I really want to see it carrying its full burden, if at all possible. So just some thoughts there. Thank you.
Thank you. And as always, this program being water rights, water quality, drinking water, all of our fee programs, we can reevaluate anytime a new fee is set based off of projections or some models. It takes a couple of years to kind of see how things flesh out, so we can always adjust this. Obviously, the discussion on what is done in the past, as Amanda said, what the board had intended to do, that can change over time. So yes, any comments you have, please submit those so we can discuss that internally, and we can have future meetings. As I can say, our next stakeholder meeting will be August 6th. Gary, you want to keep checking, make sure we get any other emails. Anybody else online have any questions or comments they want to bring up?
So this is David Ceccarelli here. I wanted to just add a couple of things here. One on attachment 2, page 2. On the bottom, there's a link, and that's the link to the trailer bill legislation for collecting fees for California Department of Fish and Wildlife of AB 658. This link will take you to the Department of Finance, and you'll see the trailer bill language there. Secondly, I just wanted to note, as David Rose mentioned earlier, with the waiver of the FERC fees, that as a result of that, we do anticipate that there will be a shortfall or a loss of revenue in that program. Again, you know, we're kind of in the evaluation stage. The FERC program, we carved that out in the Water Rights Fund. So FERC payers pay for those expenditures for that program. So as we evaluate that, we'll have to look at some adjustments in the fee schedule to generate revenue to ensure that we have sufficient revenue to cover program cost. And as David mentioned, again, you know, there's a evaluation stage we're looking at, and then we'll know more about what our program expenditures look like after the budget is signed. And then we'll be putting together, again, some proposals for that. And then, again, more discussion to come about, but we'll have more discussion at our August stakeholder meeting on that.
Yeah, this is David Rose. Thanks for mentioning that, Dave. I think it is worth noting, since we had mentioned at the beginning of this meeting that in general, fees were not going to rise for any of the fee payers, that there may be, this may be the exception to that rule, that there may be some categories of the FERC Water Quality Cert applicants and fee payers that may rise. Possibly, we don't know yet whether it will be the pre-license applicant stage fee payers or the post-license applicant or post-license fee payers, or some combination of both. But yeah, we're going to have to close that gap. But because of the way we track it, it won't bleed through to other programs. So thanks for clarifying that, Dave.
Okay, one last call out for any emails. Anybody else online? So with that, just to reiterate, as it was mentioned here by John and myself and David, our intention once we get the adopted budget here, hopefully soon, will be to recommend to our board no fee increases, the FERC piece aside, but the normal existing fee payers. We'll just have to wait and see how the numbers come out. But again, we will meet again in August. If there's something in the adopted budget that was not previously included in the May revise, we'll bring that up at that time as well. So with that, program side, Amanda, any last thing since we have you on the line?
No, nothing to add.
All right, thank you, Amanda. So with that, I appreciate everyone. Stay healthy, stay safe, and we appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you.